Welcome to BookView. Now, this week on the program, after taking a look first at Hitchhiking with Larry David and, of course, Passion with Kevin Swarbrick, we're going to focus on food and the way the foods we eat affect our body. We have two special guests this week. Michael Moss, who is the New York Times best-selling author of Salt, Sugar, Fat, the wonderful bestseller that's been on the list. We recorded an interview with him on our Worldview program a few weeks back. We're going to reprise that with a little bit of an intro here, of course. And then we're going to reintroduce a woman we spoke to in the very first Worldview program that we recorded. Her name is Carola van Bemmelen. She's a nutritionist based in the Netherlands. Now, even though her book is in Dutch, it's coming out very, very soon in English, and it's something that is very important because of the Sugar Challenge program that she runs there and here in the EU. So, coming up next here is Sugar, Salt, Fat with Michael Moss of the New York Times. Now, 50 years of smoking cigarettes took both of my parents at a relatively young age. Indeed, they were so addicted that my father would remove his oxygen nose buds for fear of flammability and then go light up a cigarette. My mother, with stage 4 lung cancer, would ask to be wheeled downstairs and outside the hospital for a smoke. An investigative journalist from the New York Times, Michael Moss, has written a #1 best-selling book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, in which he asserts the major processed food companies are essentially doing the same thing. Michael Moss was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 2010 for relentless reporting on contaminated hamburger and food safety issues that spotlighted defects in federal regulations and ultimately led to improved practices. And he was a finalist for this prize in 2006 and 1999 and has also received a Loeb Award and an Overseas Press Club citation. Before joining the Times, he was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, New York Newsday, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he's been an adjunct professor at Columbia School of Journalism. Now, we're very excited to have Michael, as this also marks our 100th interview on this program, so I could not think of a better guest. Michael Moss, welcome to Worldview.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Now 2 days ago, in 1992, China opened its first McDonald's restaurant. And your publisher on Amazon begins the description for this book by saying, in that country, for the first time, the people who weigh too much now outnumber those who weigh too little, that obesity in Mexico has tripled in the last 3 decades. Here in the UK, we have more than 60% of adults and 30% of children that are overweight, and the reigning worldwide obesity champion is the United States. Now, aside from the obvious question, will McDonald's indeed be the cause of World War III? Let's begin with how this addiction to salt, sugar, and fat happened. You begin the book with a secret meeting of the CEOs of Nestle, Kraft, Nabisco, General Mills, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, and Mars, all the way back in 1999, 14 years ago. So let's start there. What happened, and why was this meeting convened?
I came across this meeting in my early research for the book through a trove of documentation that I found that put me at the table as the industry is planning and plotting and formulating its way to new products. And it's really revealing because this is sort of when the clock starts ticking on when we now know that the industry was fully aware of its responsibility and culpability for the obesity crisis. These were the heads, as you mentioned, of the largest food companies in North America. They were brought together for this rare and private meeting to talk about none other than obesity by a cabal of insiders at these companies who were increasingly concerned about this emerging public health crisis. A senior executive of Kraft stood before them armed with 114 slides and walked them through and basically laid at their feet responsibility for not only obesity, but for diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. He even linked their products to several types of cancers and pleaded with them to collectively start doing something to turn the corner on behalf of consumers and their health.
Wow. And indeed, one of the participants in that meeting, if I remember correctly, reading correctly, was quite militant. He said to the effect, don't talk to me about nutrition, talk to me about taste. And if this stuff tastes better, don't run around trying to sell stuff that doesn't taste good. Now, you had a lab experience where you actually went in and were shown some items that were lower in salt. What was that experience like, and why has almost nothing been done?
That CEO, by the way, should point out, I mean, he was voicing what the industry believes is the basic consumer attitude, which is, hey, we may want healthy products, but we're really going to buy the ones that taste great. And that's been the industry's position for years, is we're just giving them really what they really want down deep. And I have this question for the industry, especially as salt became a large concern in England, as you know, and other countries because of links to high blood pressure, et cetera. I wanted to know, what is it about salt that you guys, why can't you just take it down in your products? What is it? And so some of the largest companies, Kraft, Campbell's Soup, and Kellogg, invited me into their research and development departments, where they made for me specially made icons of versions of their icons without salt. And it was one of the most horrific experiences I ever had. Cheez-Its, this cracker that normally I can eat all day long, you couldn't even swallow it without salt, because salt provides texture, solubility. The frozen waffles, we popped them in the toaster and they came out looking and tasting like straw. The clincher was the cereal, the cornflakes, which we put in the bowl, poured some milk on it, and they tasted like metal. The spokeswoman for the company just got this horrific look on her taste, and the chief scientist explained that one of the aspects of salt that makes it a miracle ingredient to companies is that it will mask some of the off notes, the bad flavors that are inherent to some processed foods. The industry, I learned from that encounter, is more hooked on salt as well as sugar and fat than even we are. And I think that's one of the really telling things that it's important to understand as we try to move forward here.
Wow. We're speaking with the New York Times investigative journalist Michael Moss, author of Salt, Sugar, Fat on Worldview with Dennis Campbell. Michael, your book talks about a man by the name of Howard Moskowitz, the food game changer who optimized soup, pizza, salad dressing, and how he used a mathematical model to match ingredients to recorded sensory perception, so much so that he could literally dial up a new product using this approach. Can you tell us a little bit how this worked, especially in the case of Prego spaghetti sauce? I found that one to be fascinating to read about.
Yeah, I mean, Howard was kind of the first person to show the industry that it could increase sales by coming up with sort of somewhat different versions of the same product. Until then, everybody thought, well, the way to go is to find the most perfect, say, tomato sauce. And Howard was the person who came along and said, hey, wait a minute, though. Some people like chunky, some people like spicy, some people like this. And so he helped the industry sort of segregate products into categories, which increased sales. But the real thing that Howard does, too, is that he has an acute understanding of what he calls the bliss point, which is the perfect amount of sweetness in products. And look, one of the issues for health advocates is that you used to find sugar in the soda and the ice cream aisle, and it's now migrated to products throughout the grocery store as companies engineer the bliss point for their products. And so now bread is sweet, yogurt has as much sugar in it as ice cream. And yes, in the pasta sauce aisle, some pasta sauces will have the equivalent of sugar of a couple of Oreo cookies in a tiny little half serving, all designed, all engineered to sort of, exploit the biology, especially of children, as one scientist said to me, by hitting the perfect amounts of sugar that'll send us over the moon.
Well, yeah, we had a Dutch nutritionist on our very first program, and she explained how sugar was in everything, things that we couldn't even possibly imagine. Now, we've got this intersection, though, of a bunch of companies, at least on the surface, trying to do the right thing about obesity, yet the huge profit and business numbers here. I mean, the case that you did of Yoplait with the $500 million success there, essentially taking breakfast yogurt and sugared it to a point where it actually had more sugar than the sugariest of cereals, Lucky Charms, and the perception that healthy equals bad taste. Can these companies ever resist their own profit need and urge, and how?
I don't look at them as being these evil empires that intentionally set out to make us obese. They are companies doing what companies do, which is to make as much money as possible by selling as much product. And I think that they were to be convinced that they could make as much money selling healthy products, they would do that. Right. So going forward, I think that's one of the issues here. I think we're at a tipping point And one thing that will have to happen is that consumers will have to be more louder about voicing their concern about, their growing concern about what they put into their bodies. That's one thing. And then the companies are going to have to learn to find a way to resist pushback from Wall Street, which demands, increased revenue, higher profits, and is always there looking at everything they do from the standpoint of revenue and profit.
In a little bit of time we have left here, I want to talk, though, about what seems to be the litigious nature of the world and the sort of the ticking bomb here. How long will it be before some savvy lawyer attempts to create a class of aggrieved, obese people? What do these companies have to say about the threat of potential financial and even possibly criminal liability they could face as a result of their actions?
In 1999, the Kraft official who stood up before the CEOs in that secret meeting said to them, even if you don't accept responsibility for the obesity crisis, I'm telling you that it's not if, but when lawyers who sued Big Tobacco will come after you. And they're going to come after you for the health costs associated with obesity, much as they did after tobacco with the health costs associated with nicotine. And in fact, Philip Morris, the largest tobacco company, not long after that meeting began warning its food managers. Philip Morris became the largest food manufacturer in North America when it acquired General Foods and Kraft. And it began warning its food people that you guys are going to face as big a problem on salt, sugar, fat, obesity as we are now with nicotine on those health issues and the public trust. So there are people inside the industry who are really, really scared of the notion that tort lawyers, if not states, will come after them for the costs associated with overconsumption of processed foods.
Well, it certainly is something we need to keep a very strong look at, and I want to thank you for joining us today here on Worldview.
My pleasure.
We've been speaking with Michael Moss, author of the book Salt, Sugar, Fat. And you can find his book on all of the usual online platforms, from Amazon to Nook to everywhere, and all the fine bookstores. And please do check out his website at www.michaelmossbooks.com and his regular writing for the New York Times.